Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the SASB standards for reporting ingredient sourcing risks in the processed foods industry. Look, if you're operating in or analyzing this space, you already know the deal. This industry relies on a massive, highly complex, and honestly, truly global supply chain for agricultural inputs. So we're going to break down exactly how you measure, manage, and actually report the vulnerabilities hiding within that network.
Let's kick things off with a pretty crucial question, one that really highlights the macro risks facing the global food industry right now. What actually happens to your supply chain when the water runs out? It's not some far-off hypothetical scenario anymore. It is a very real, very pressing operational and financial risk. And trust me, investors are keeping a super close eye on it.
As you can see here, resource scarcity directly hits your ability to source essential materials. And yeah, that absolutely impacts profitability. According to the SASB standard, issues like climate change, water scarcity, and land management, they directly threaten supply availability. And what does that exposure cause? Immense price volatility. Think about it. If you can't get your inputs, or if the prices of those inputs absolutely skyrocket because of a drought, your bottom line is taking a direct hit. But companies that source more productive, less resource-intensive ingredients, they can actually reduce that volatility and sidestep those nasty supply disruptions.
Okay, let's look at our agenda for today. We're going to cover 5 key areas. First, the fragile supply chain. Second, identifying priority ingredients. Third, quantifying water stress. Fourth, environmental and social risks. And finally, strategies for risk mitigation. Let's get into it.
All right, Section 1, the fragile supply chain. Let's locate the risk.
So within the SAS framework, this whole topic anchors us right down at the bottom of the table you see here. We're focusing specifically on metric FBPF 440A, which is ingredient sourcing. Now, this section basically requires companies to disclose 2 main things. First off, what is the percentage of food ingredients sourced from regions with high or extremely high baseline water stress? And second, they need a list of priority food ingredients paired with a real discussion about the sourcing risks tied to environmental and social factors. So let's break down exactly how to do both of those things.
Moving right along to Section 2, priority ingredients. It's all about defining what actually matters.
Here is the absolute crucial point. You don't need to track down and report on every single pinch of salt or dash of spice in your products. You just have to focus on the highest priority ingredients. The standard actually gives us a really clear definition for this. A priority ingredient, and we're excluding water itself here, is basically one that fits into a few specific categories that directly impact the absolute core of your business operations. By narrowing your focus to these specific criteria on the screen, you can actually strategically manage those vulnerabilities in your supplier network. You really just need to ask yourself a few questions. Does this ingredient represent our largest expense? Is it literally essential to our final products? Or does sourcing it carry significant environmental or social risks? And keep in mind, this includes ingredients you get directly from contract growers as well as producer supply agreements. If an ingredient checks those boxes, boom, it's a priority, and it goes straight on your reporting list.
Okay, Section 3, quantifying water stress. Let's figure out how to calculate the actual impact.
All right, here is the 3-step masterclass for metric FBPF 440A.1. This is how you take a wildly complex global supply chain and turn it into hard, quantifiable data. Step 1, you isolate your Tier 1 suppliers. Step 2, you map their locations using a specific industry tool. And Step 3, you run the final calculation based on cost. Let's zoom in and look a little closer at how these steps actually work. Now remember, the calculation here is strictly limited to Tier 1 suppliers. And that's great news because it keeps the data gathering direct and, actually manageable. You're only looking at the suppliers that transact directly with your entity for food ingredients. That's it. This sets a really clear boundary for your data collection so you don't end up getting totally lost multiple layers deep into the supply chain. So once you've pinpointed those Tier 1 suppliers, you need to figure out where exactly they are withdrawing and consuming water to produce your stuff. You're going to map those suppliers using the World Resources Institute's Water Risk Atlas tool. Most people just call it Aqueduct. Specifically, you're looking for regions with high baseline water stress, which is defined as 40 to 80%, or extremely high baseline water stress, meaning anything greater than 80%. Once you have that, you just take the cost of the ingredients purchased from those specific stress regions and divide it by the total cost of all food ingredients from all your Tier 1 suppliers. And there you go. That gives you your percentage. But hey, what happens when the real world gets in the way of perfect data? We all know what happens. If your data has gaps, the standard simply requires transparency about what you don't know. Honestly, that's just as important for investors as what you do know. So if you literally cannot identify or collect data for all your Tier 1 suppliers, you are required to disclose the percentage of products where the source region and the water risks are unknown. Honesty about your blind spots is baked right into the framework.
Which brings us to Section 4, Environmental and Social Risks. Let's talk about the qualitative disclosures.
This table does a really nice job of clearly showing the divide between environmental threats like deforestation and social threats like human rights issues. Both of these can seriously disrupt your supply. For the environmental side, you need to discuss things like how drought and climate change could spike your ingredient prices, or maybe the reputational damage your brand could take if deforestation is linked back to your supply chain. On the social side, you've got to look at how workers' rights directly impact agricultural productivity, or again, the reputational risks tied to human rights disputes. Let's move on and see how all of this builds into an actionable corporate strategy.
All right, final section, Section 5, Risk Mitigation. How do we actually resolve these tensions?
You are fully expected to detail your strategic approach here. So for example, you might talk about how you're investing in R&D for more resilient alternative crops. The standard actually lists several specific strategies you can discuss to mitigate those environmental risks. Are you diversifying your suppliers so you aren't putting all your eggs in one basket, totally reliant on a single region? Are you running training programs for your suppliers on environmental best practices? Or, maybe you're investing in audits and certifications for your suppliers. These are the concrete, proactive steps that investors are actively looking for.
And it's a very similar story for mitigating social risks. It involves proactive steps, like maintaining a strict code of conduct and actually engaging directly with your suppliers on labor issues. You could also talk about implementing training programs, maybe for things like safe agrochemical application to ensure worker health. When you show that you're actively engaging with your supply chain on human rights and enforcing a solid code of conduct, it proves to investors that you're managing these slightly less tangible but massively impactful social risks. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to consider something. How well do you truly know your supply chain? And is your reporting robust enough right now to navigate the resource scarcity challenges of tomorrow? Look, the SASB standards aren't just some boring accounting exercise. They are literally a blueprint for building a more resilient, transparent, and ultimately more profitable food system. So think about it. If a major drought hit your primary sourcing region tomorrow, would your current data tell you exactly how exposed you are? Because that's the exact level of clarity this standard demands. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.